I'm Iona Fyfe. I'm a folk singer from Huntly in Aberdeenshire, and I'm delighted to be doing a workshop as part of Stonehaven Folk Festival's virtual festival. So, this workshop will hopefully give you some insight into the wonderful folk song collections and online archives that we have at our disposal. A lot of the special collections are in libraries which have been shut down over lockdown, but being able to access some of these collections online is tremendously useful, whether you're trying to interpret a new ballad or whether you're just interested in ballad scholarship. What got me singing the old songs and ballads? Well, I grew up going to folk festivals and sing-arounds and folk clubs, and specifically TMSA, Traditional Music and Song Association of Scotland competitions, bothy ballad competitions, traditional ballad competitions, historic poetry competitions. And I'd go to these sing-arounds where I'd learn repertoire from older tradition bearers and singers. And I also used online archives from quite a young age, which allowed me to explore the repertoire and singing tradition of people who I had never met. They had passed on before I had ever went to a folk festival. So that gave me some sort of kind of connection to the past and connection to these singers who I had only heard about through anecdotes from other people. And it allowed me to connect with their repertoire and the stories and the songs that they were singing. But what really got me interested in ballads is finding songs that sent messages which kind of transcend generations and background. Militifty's Annie is child 233, and we'll get onto the child ballad soon. But this song was the most recorded ballad by female source singers in the 20th century. However, the ballad dates back to 1693, I believe. So that's a long time for the ballad to basically still be in transmission and still be popular and sung by lots and lots of folk singers and ballad singers. So I'd hope that this works, but let's have a listen to Jeannie Robertson singing Andra Lamy or the Militifty's Annie.
At the Militifty there lived a man in the neighbourhood. Oh, Fyfe, he had a lovely daughter fair, whose name was Bonnie Annie. Her cheeks was like the bloomin' rose that tells the rosy morning with innocent heart and graceful means, her beauteous face adorning.
So, what actually is a ballad? Well, lots of different people and scholars have very different views on what a ballad is and what it isn't. But to me, I would just say that it's a narrative song or narrative songs that tell stories originally passed down through oral transmission. But David Buchan, a scholar, says that it's not entirely satisfactory to describe a ballad as a narrative song that has been transmitted by tradition. He has the processes of tradition have varied in response to social change. So it makes sense that there's three stages of the tradition: non-literacy, initial literacy, and settled literacy. A lot of the people who passed down ballads, the folk of the oral tradition, were non-literate. So it was a tradition that was passed by oral transmission by people who necessarily wouldn't actually make use of written annotation or manuscripts. So these songs were solely passed down orally. And then there was an initial literacy where people perhaps started beginning to write down the ballads. But then settled literacy was a point in time where the ballad text existed in manuscripts and was written down and collected. And each three of these periods of time yielded a different composition or transmission of this ballad. I might be talking complete rubbish, but hopefully the description and the quote on the screen will help kind of describe what I'm trying to say here. So George Leman Kittredge, he said a ballad is a song that tells a story, or to take the other point of view, a story told in song. It may be defined as a short narrative poem adapted for singing, simple in plot and metrical structure, divided into stanzas. I can certainly agree with that, but sometimes ballads are certainly not simple in plot, and there's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of speeches within ballads, especially historical ballads. They go on for quite some time. And for me, when I am interpreting a ballad for the first time, I look for how economic or economically told the ballad can be. If there's parts of the ballad which you can take out without detracting from the whole arc of the ballad, then that allows the ballad to be more economically told, quicker told, because our concentrations aren't as long now as perhaps were before. Even Lizzie Higgins herself was once quoted saying, "People don't have time for the long, long ballads." And that's really interesting. So for me, I am interested in keeping this ballad quite unique to yourself by picking out your text, but also keeping it economic so it can be told and not protracted and drawn out, because it can be quite tedious to listen to lots and lots and lots of ballads which haven't been self-edited. They're word for word what's been on the page. And for me, that's not the oral tradition, that's just singing something that you've seen on a page. So being able to put your own stamp on the ballad is quite important, and we'll go on about that later. So a ballad is a story of the four elements common to all narrative: action, character, setting, and theme. The ballad emphasises the first. Absolutely. In every ballad, whether that be historical ones or ones of battle or murders, usually the ballad begins in media res, in the beginning or the middle of the action. So traditional ballad is a type of ballad. There are three types of ballad which I'm going to talk about today. So the traditional ballad is orally transmitted with no known authors, usually by communities who were illiterate or semi-illiterate or semi-literate. For example, farm labourers and travelling people. There is a huge emphasis on the action, as I said, begins in media res, often leading to the denouement. I don't think I've said that right. The timeline is relatively short, and ballads don't take place over a long period of time. The ballad almost is taking place over that period of action. So they're not kind of songs which have, the action happens and then we look back on the action, then we look forward to the action. It just kind of happens, and then there might be a comment at the end. A lot of people compare ballads to the last act of the play, which is quite interesting. So the first person doesn't commonly occur in ballads except from in speech of several characters. The narration is quite impersonal. There are no comments, opinions, or reflections by the narrator. Usually this is the case. However, in some ballads, for example, Mill of Tifty's Annie, at the very end, after Agnes has died, the narration moves from the action, her death, to addressing the audience. And the ballad goes, "Now people hear, both far and near, they pity Tifty's Annie. Fa died for loving one peer lad, for loving Andra Lammy." So technically the narrator, but not the singer, the narrator is giving a comment that is finished after the action, if that makes any sense. I'm sorry if this doesn't. George Leman Kittredge said, "If it were possible to conceive a tale as telling itself without the instrumentality of a conscious speaker, the ballad would be such a tale." So the form of ballads tend to be in the ballad stanza, which is a 4-line stanza rhyming A, B, C, B. But there are other forms, A, B, C, B, A, B, B, in which pulses will come in different parts of the lines. Ballads have devices within them which usually help the performer remember the ballad. So repetition and refrains, repeated lines and phrases. For example, in Barbara Allen, the lines are often repeated at the end of the verse, and this also signals the audience to join in. In Johnny O'Bradishley, the last line of each verse is also repeated, and this also invites the audience to join in. Stock phrases and floating lines that you'll find in several different ballads are just a device of the balladry. So saddle the black horse, saddle the brown. You can hear that in a few different ballads. Mother, mother, make my bed, make it long and narrow can be heard in things like Barbara Allen, Militif Zani. It's just a stock phrases and these floating lines that basically make up several different ballads and features. Often a feature will be a bird speaking, or someone saying, I had a saxpence and I broke it in two, representing the parting. But especially in these ballads, some of the lines repeat themselves, like ye shine whar ye stand. That comes up in a few, especially up and smack a wee bird. So it's quite interesting, the types of devices used in balladry that aren't necessarily used in any other type of song. The broadside ballad is another type of ballad, and broadsides were printed on big sheets of paper during the 16th to 20th centuries and sold at streets and at county fairs. For example, the Poet's Box in Dundee, 224 Overgate, Dundee, housed many broadside ballads. This was entertainment for an urban population rather than rural communities. Often the themes within the broadside ballads were usually reporting on current happenings, issues, and perhaps some sort of issues that have been, they were almost like tabloids. They were opposed to the historical ballad. They were kind of almost, not slapstick, but kind of, they'll report on scandals as well. That's the word I'm looking for. Often there's a few broadside ballads which has a rural person go to the city and land themselves in trouble, such as the Big Kilmarnock Bonnet or Jock Hawk's Adventures in Glasgow. It's quite funny. A lot of these are sung to familiar, well-known melodies, and that is absolutely the case for Jock Hawk's Adventures in Glasgow. It uses the melody of the well-known bothy ballad Guise of Tuch. And of course, this sparks familiarity within the singer or the audience because they automatically recognise it from another tune, which I think is very interesting. However, Francis James Child did not like them at all. He called them vulgar, products of a low kind of art, and despicable and worthless. Since I think this is rather unfair, because a lot of these songs ended up being recorded quite a lot by revivalist, source and contemporary singers, and there certainly is worth in a lot of the songs that have been printed in broadside. So I think it's rather unfair of Child to say this of them. Another type of ballad is the literary ballad. And this was basically written by poets or educated poets, or nowadays songwriters, in emulation and imitation of the form, structure and style of the traditional ballad. So they're using the form of the ballad and writing their own stories in a contemporary but same form of that ballad. So in the 18th and 19th centuries, known poets took a hold of this form and structure and wrote their literary ballads telling their own stories. So there's three examples, Robert Burns one, a Robert Louis Stevenson and an Oscar Wilde literary ballad there. So the themes of these ballads are quite varied. Stories of heroism, battle, adventure. Battle of Harlaw is a great one of those. Betrayal and murder and revenge. Eda McGordon, Burning of Auchindoun, Dowdens of Yarrow, Twa Sisters. Tragic love, Militive Dizani, actually, I mean, a lot of these themes overlap. Militive Dizani could be in murder or tragic love. Um, Supernatural ballads, ballads which involved magic, were quite popular. Tamlin, Thomas the Rhymer, Alison Gross, False Night Upon the Road, Elfin Night. And then there's ballads of love, either requited or unrequited. So Glen Logie is about the only ballad that I know in my repertoire that has a happy ending where people are in love and end with marriage. So it's quite interesting. So this is where we come to talk about who I have heard of being referenced to as the grandfather of the traditional ballad. Francis James Child created the English and Scottish popular ballads, and on the resource sheet that you've been emailed to you, hopefully, you can download your very own copy of the English and Scottish popular ballads. It is quite an old book that's been scanned and it's been put online, and you can download it and have it on your phone or your laptop or whatever. And this is brilliant because otherwise it's 5 books, it's 5 volumes that you'd have to cart around with you. So if you click that link, you'll get to download it. So he was born in 1825 to a sailmaker. His father was a sailmaker. They didn't have much money and they believed that he wouldn't necessarily get a very good education. However, he was very bright and showed a lot of promise, and ultimately he graduated from Harvard. He was ultimately, he became Harvard's first ever professor of English. And this 5-volume work, published between 1882 and 1898, was considered by a lot of people as the canon of folk music, and today remains the standard of which all other ballads works are measured by, despite it not being a perfect work. A lot of people don't understand why he chose some of the ballads that he chose, yet why he rejected others from being in the collection. He admits himself that he didn't quite understand the framework that he was operating under, and why some of the choices he made of including the ballads or rejecting the ballads. And a lot of people don't know what his process was when choosing. He was indeed an armchair scholar. He didn't leave Harvard. He didn't come over to Scotland and collect them firsthand. He didn't go to England or collect them firsthand. He received manuscripts through the mail from different scholars, including William Motherwell, who was the collector, the author of Minstrelsy, Ancient and Modern. So he got all of this stuff sent to him, but it was quite a lot of material. His scope was very international and very wide, and he didn't just look for songs in English or Scots or whatnot. He looked for versions of the ballads in different languages and tried to tie in European variants, North American variants, to create a collection which ultimately is pioneering and is thought of very highly, but shows a universal approach to the traditional ballad and a 3-dimensional approach as well. He didn't focus on music or melody. This was mostly text, which is quite interesting. However, Bertrand H. Bronson comes along and he publishes 4 volumes of traditional tunes of the child ballads between 1959 and 1972. He brings together all of the available tunes for each and every ballad, together with annotated and organised texts with notes describing the history and development of each tune and tune family, where they came from, their context, for example. This collection was immediately accepted as one of the most important and indispensable texts for ballad scholars, performers and students, with notation for 4,120 tunes, which was a rather large milestone in ballad scholarship. However, I feel that this is a great addition to anyone's collection, but it is tricky and costly to get a hold of. Also, if you don't read music, you might not reap the full benefits of it. So this is where archived recordings might help you more than having this book. So we've been talking about the traditional ballad, but I don't think we can really address traditional balladry without addressing the significance of the northeast of Scotland. So Francis James Child himself noted that of his A texts, the most important, so for example, A was the best or the most important, and then if you went to H or whatever, it would kind of be declining in importance of the text. So his most important texts, the A texts, 91 out of 305 of the ballads came from the northeast, from Aberdeenshire alone. So 1 in every 3 of his chief Scottish texts come from the same area. So out of this collection, 305 ballads, almost a third of them come from one region alone. Les Wheeler said that the Border Ballad title is simply a wrong reading of all evidence. Sir Walter Scott got the best of his material from a northeast woman, Mrs. Anna Brown of Falkland. Les Wheeler also goes on to say, there can be little doubt that the northeast is the real home of the ballad. The study of folk song would be incomplete if we did not take the Lowland Scots songs into consideration. So quite interesting there. Who sung the ballads? Well, travellers and itinerant workers, farm labourers amongst others, sung ballads and were conduits in the transmission of these ballads, songs and stories. Singers such as Jane Turriff, Lucy Stewart, Belle Stewart, Elizabeth Stewart, Jeannie Robertson, Lizzie Higgins, Stanley Robertson, Sheila Stewart, of course, are just a few of these great tradition bearers and people who interpreted ballads. Fiona Ritchie and Doug Orr, in their 2014 book, The Wayfaring Strangers, said that the reputation of the travellers as tradition bearers continues undiminished today. Their concentration in the northeast of Scotland consolidated the region's estimation as the cradle for the evolution of balladry, influencing other regions, including the Scottish borders. So there's several different scholars who firmly believe that the northeast of Scotland is the ballad heartland of the English-speaking world. Hamish Henderson referred to his recording work among travellers, especially in the berry fields of Blair, as like holding a tin can under Niagara Falls. So as an oral art form, the ballad doesn't need to be written down to be performed or preserved. Nowadays, it has been because of collecting, but many of the carriers of the ballad tradition were indeed illiterate and couldn't read and write, nor could they make use of a written and notated ballad at all. Couldn't read words, let alone music. So the ballads were collected by song collectors, scholars, folklorists, and they created manuscripts and recordings, which then became very important resources for us to look at our songs online and manuscripts online. Emily Lyle says, we should never forget that the ballad is a sung genre with a whole musical dimension that is not caught by the printed text. To gain a full appreciation, every opportunity should be taken of listening to live or recorded performances. So myself as a folk singer, I would be trying to make a good effort to go to sing-arounds and folk clubs and ballad competitions to listen to other people singing the songs. And that's how I learned a lot of my repertoire, was listening to older singers interpreting these songs. So we're going to go on to the resources now that we can utilise to our advantage when learning new songs. So Mainly Norfolk is a great online resource created by Reinhard Zierke, and it features lyrics to over 3,000 songs and ballads, as well as contextual ballad information, liner notes, sleeve notes, index songs, and also folk music publications. So if you want to see what's inside a specific book, he's listed out all of this. Meanwhile, if you want to see who has sung and who has recorded commercially any of the ballads or any songs, you can see exactly who's recorded them, when, what CD it was released on, what compilation is out. I think this is a very, very important resource, and without this, I probably wouldn't have gotten through my university degree. So let's have a look at mainly Norfolk. So as you can see here, he has put out a huge amount of content and information. I am going to continue this workshop by looking at all these different archives, but I'm going to be looking for the same ballad. And the ballad I'm going to be looking for, we've already listened to today, the Melotip des Années. So in this, on mainly Norfolk, I'm going to click on Child. As you can see here, you can either search for a ballad by using the Roud Index, the Child Ballad Index, Laws, Henry, and also the Greg Duncan Folk Song Collection. So if I click in Child, and I know that Child Ballad 233 is Andrew Lamy or the Melotip des Années, and I submit, I find it here, Andrew Lamy / Melotip des Années, and both titles have been used. So we can see here all of the academic numbers which have been attributed to this ballad. So now when we look at other places, we'll know that this is the specific, the numbers that we have to search for. We can also see recordings of people singing it. So here we have Sheila Stewart's of Blair Gowrie. You can see some of the earliest recordings that have been made. And then from this, you can either go and search for these CDs, that's a rounder one, or you can use this information to search on other archives. So as you can see, there's liner notes here. Jane Turriff of Mintlaw, Aberdeenshire, sang Melotip des Années on the 1975 Tangent Anthology. He is very much went from the very beginning, 1953, well, not the very beginning, but the beginning of this ballad, I guess, being recorded and made available commercially on a rounder CD. And he's went all the way up to present day with myself singing it, but also Dougie Mackenzie on his 2019 recording. He's also featured lyrics, Ray Fisher's lyrics, as well as Gordina McCulloch's lyrics, Martin Simpson too. So several different lyrics you can find, Jean Redpath, and links to where you can also find more information about the ballad and different places that it's housed. So I'd say this is almost like a one-stop shop, and I would, if you were going for to interpret a new ballad, I would be looking at mainly Norfolk first in order to see who else has recorded it. Can I listen to their versions? Where can I find it in the collections? As you can see, it's Greg Duncan, Volume 5, number 1018. So that is mainly Norfolk. Tober and Dulces, the Kist of Riches, 40,000 oral recordings. It's a huge archive, and it's absolutely wonderful. So at Kist of Riches, let's try and search Mel O Tifty here. Comes up with lots of things that I've tried to search in the past. Brilliant. And we're seeing Willie Matheson, and very easily you can see lots of different versions on this exact page. You can see a lot of their information. You don't have to click into it. It's very user friendly. It's quick, and it's quite easy to use. You can have a little clip.
At the Melotip there live command.
You can show more to see some more information, locations. I think it's very useful, and it's very user friendly, very easy to use. I really love Tober and Dulces. The James Madison Carpenter collection was finally published in 2018 and has 13,500 pages of paper, 179 wax cylinders, and lots more. James Madison Carpenter came to the UK on several trips. He had a car, which is quite interesting for that time. Most intensively, he went to the northeast of Scotland, Yorkshire, Lincolnshire, Cotswolds, and Cornwall. He had gotten contributions from people who had recorded for other collectors, such as Cecil Sharp, Gavin Gregg, and other people who would later be visited by Hamish Henderson, Kenneth Goldstein, Lomax. He also located singers who were never ever recorded before or since. And the most prolific was Belle Duncan, a woman. Belle Duncan lived at Lamb Hill in Aberdeenshire, and she was in her 80s. He described her as the greatest ballad singer of all time, yet she wasn't collected by anyone else. Her repertoire had 300 songs, including 65 child ballads. So if you think of how long some of these child ballads would have been back then, before people were editing them really a lot down to make them economical, then that would have been a huge amount of songs for her to have in her head. So this is the James Madison Carpenter collection, and it's housed at the Vaughan Williams Memorial Library, but it was a joint effort, I believe, with the National Library of Congress in America, the Elphinstone Institute in Aberdeen, and the FDIS, English Folk Song and Dance, in the Vaughan Williams Memorial Library down in London. So as you can see here, it's quite, there's a lot of folders. It spans a lot of things. I mean, you have to look quite deep in each folder to find what you're looking for. So here there's a lot in this: mummers' plays, shanties, manuscripts. There is quite a lot to be digging into there. So I would suggest typing down, this is just all of my rubbish that I put in. So child 2 through 3. And it is taken a bit longer to do, but it gets there. So child 233 is Mill of Tiftizani, or Tiftizani. So if we wrote in Andrew Lamy, then we wouldn't have gotten this one here. So that is why it's very useful to type in the number, or the round number, which is 98, or the child ballad number. I think it's much more useful to type that in than to type the name in, because some people might spell Andrew with an Andra, and some people might not put in it might not be catalogued as Mill Tiftizani. As you can see here, it's just Tiftizani here. And importantly, Tiftizani here. So you can immediately see that there are a lot of manuscripts with, little jotted down papers and stuff with music on it. And if you read music, that is brilliant. You see here that this is registered as child 233, but it is nothing, the title is not Andrew Lamy at all. So this is all still in the James Madison Carpenter collection, collected by different people. It's going along, we have more recordings here. Now we're thinking about listening to some of these. The only issue is that this Madison Carpenter guy was the first person to record. So these are on cylinders and they're very difficult to make out. So it might not be as useful as Tobrin Dulcus. They had very clean cut, good quality recordings. However, these cylinder ones are not as good. We can click this here. However, I wouldn't discount that because you can definitely make out faintly what it is. So this is actually a really, really brilliant collection. I think there is something to be said for digging in these folders and seeing what you might be able to find, which is great. So back to the PowerPoint. Bodleian Libraries, the Broadside Ballads Online, a digital collection of English printed ballad sheets from between the 16th and 20th centuries. However, a lot of these English ballads were not English ballads. Militif Zani is okay typically, and in Fyfe. We very much know that Fyfe is in Scotland, and this ballad is definitely from Fyfe because there is truth to it. Parish records, you can go and visit her grave. We know for a fact it's in Fyfe. Fyfe is in Scotland. It's a Scots ballad, but they have titled it English, so I think we just have to deal with that. So if we put Andrew Lamy, it immediately comes up with the broadside that was printed by Brander and Company, or and Co. In Elgin. And you see the first lines, click on it, and this is Andrew Lamy or Militif Zani, and you can see it, you can download it, that's it there. There's only one version, but this looks very, very good, quite a long version of it. So you see the ride number there again, and then the Bodleian number there. So that is the Broadside Ballads Online. National Library of Scotland, Word on the Street, is a broadside online collection with manuscripts with 1,800 in it. However, Militif Zani won't be in there, and it is not in here. However, there's some other really great ballads, and you can browse by the theme here. So theme of war, and there's several here, and these would be broadside ones. So yeah, this is a great archive that was put out by the National Library of Scotland. The Alan Lomax archive is quite interesting because, of course, Alan Lomax did come to the northeast of Scotland with Hamish Henderson and collected a lot of ballads and songs. But this collection, put out by Cultural Equity, is quite distinct from the earlier recordings that Lomax made when he was working under the Library of Congress. So yes, the Alan Lomax archive. You definitely need to click song here, otherwise it's not going to come up. And if you put Militifty, then it should come up. A lot of the time when you click in the box, it's like I'm searching for my own music, but I'm only doing that to link it to other people. Don't worry, I'm not that vain. It's usually if I need to apply for things or put my links into other things, that's why you're seeing that I'm searching for myself so much, don't worry. So you're not actually seeing anything here at all. So we haven't found anything when we type in Militifty. If we type in Andrew Lamy, however, I think more comes up. So you see Bonnie Annie and Andrew Lamy, all these things, commentary by Jeanie Robertson. However, my question is that these files, Willie Matheson, there's a version of Willie Matheson and Jeanie Robertson singing this on Trober and Dulcus, so it might be repeats. So I'd just be wary. But search, definitely use this archive because you're definitely going to find things that aren't perhaps on other online sites.
At Militif they lived a man in the neighbourhood of Fyfe, had a lovely daughter fair, was called Bonnie Annie.
So yes, back to the PowerPoint. The Irish Traditional Music Archive. We definitely shouldn't discount looking at Irish archives, even if we're looking for a ballad or a song, because they are really, really useful and you're going to find lots of stuff that you might not have came across. So if we go into the catalogue and we want to search the catalogue here, if you type in Child 233, we are seeing a few things. recordings. You can find CDs that it's been recorded on. So we can see Andrew Lamy, Child 233, has been recorded on this particular CD by Ewan McCall and Peggy Seeger. So we haven't necessarily found a recording that we can listen to right now. So if we go in a new search and maybe put Mel O'Tiff's Annie, then we are seeing a reference to a book here. So we now know that if we went in and opened up Emergent Singer, Transformative Voice by James Porter and Herschel Gower, that this ballad would be mentioned in it. But yet we're still not seeing an actual sound recording that we can listen to. It's more like it shows the CD and the cassette that this is on. But this is really useful because we know that it's on this cassette, so then, for example, we can go and find this audio cassette, which is still really useful because it gives us a good pointer of where things are at. So where to listen to contemporary recordings? Well, there's a playlist of child ballads at this particular link, and it has source, revivalist and contemporary interpretations. So it kind of spans everywhere. You can go back to the very beginnings, or you could listen to versions that have only been recorded this year or last year. You can find source, revivalist and contemporary recordings on the Index of Child Ballads at Mainly Norfolk. So this particular link here, if you go here, you will find all of the child ballads in order. For example, if you randomly just click the Lair de Drum, you'll see, 1951, you'll see its information again, and then versions that's been recorded. Sometimes he'll put like a YouTube link that you can quickly just listen to, but with this information, you know who's recorded it, where they recorded it, what CD it's on, what record it's on, and you can very, very quickly go and listen to it. So just a wee thing before I wrap up. I hope that this has been hopefully helpful and hasn't just been me rambling on. My song process, when I am learning a song, I really want my ballad to be unique to me. I don't want to just take one text and sing the song or the ballad off that text. I want to pick and choose different verses from different texts in order to make the ballad unique to me, to know that my version is different from other people's. And what I do is I source 3 versions of the ballad text. So whether that be from the Greg Duncan, which I do have, or the online child ballad text, or older ballad collections such as Percy's Relics or Heard, I'll find at least 3 texts that I like. Then I'll find 3 melodies that I like, either by looking at a manuscript of melody, which I don't like to do because I'm not very good at reading music, but I'll probably listen to online archives and contemporary recordings to try and pick 3 melodies that are my favourite 3. Then after that, I will pick my favourite core text and I'll edit that. And maybe I'll take a verse from text number 2 and text number 3 and make a composite of all of them so that it's a unique version. And I'll tweak up different dialects and different words, to try and make the song as suited to me. And then I'll pick a core melody and maybe I'll mess around with it a little bit. Maybe I'll try and change it, put it up a little bit, make it lower. It really depends. And then after I'm very happy with the text and the melody that I have, I'll add chords and work with an accompanist and do an arrangement. Or I won't if I intend to only sing that ballad unaccompanied. I think that when you're singing a ballad, know what you're changing about it. Know where your versions have came from. Know who's singing you got it from. Who did you listen to that spurred that love for that ballad? Why their version? How do they sing it? Where did they get it from? These are all things to be thinking about when you're interpreting a ballad. So there's some resources here, but the resource sheet that I emailed out, or it'll be emailed out to you, will be much more useful with more links and more explanatory notes about what the collections are. These are a list of opportunities for learners in the northeast of Scotland, things that if you want to further your education, if you want to become go to a school for music, if you want to go to Ceilidh Days or whatnot, these are some great opportunities here. Any questions, please just send to my email, info@ionafife.com. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that hasn't just been me rambling. Thank you so much to Stonehaven Virtual Folk Festival. Cheers.